7 years after being with the CEO, he said he was tired of me and turned to a young, beautiful college student. I threw away the ring, cut up the wedding dress I had just bought, and caught a flight out that very night. He predicted I'd come crawling back to him within 3 days. But 3 days later, after a video call with me, he was completely stunned. When love has no ending, it becomes a lifelong trap. And so, the story begins. In the 7th year of my relationship with Felix, I secretly bought a wedding dress, mustered all my courage, and prepared to propose to him. But unfortunately, I was a few minutes late to the party that day and happened to overhear him chatting with his friends. Hope? I've been bored of her for ages, Felix said, lighting a cigarette with a lazy smile. 7 years. Wouldn't you be tired too? The others laughed along. True, 7 years. Even the most stunning woman would lose her charm by then. But Hope really is gorgeous. Great figure too. Remember Felix's birthday? She wore that dress with the plunging back. Every guy in the room couldn't take their eyes off her. Honestly, Felix, you were so into her back then. Can you really let her go now? Felix's voice was indifferent. When have I ever lied? Well then, if I were to pursue Hope, you wouldn't mind, right? Go ahead, Felix said nonchalantly, exhaling a puff of smoke. As long as you don't embarrass yourself. Taking over someone I've grown tired of? That's on you. Another round of laughter erupted. That night, I didn't enter the private room. I made up an excuse, saying I had a headache and needed to go home early. Felix didn't ask a single question before hanging up the phone. My decision to end things was solidified that night. Within days, rumors spread like wildfire in our circle. Felix was pursuing a sophomore from a performing arts college. She was young, sweet, and innocent. Felix's grand gestures were as extravagant as ever, just like when he had pursued me, making a spectacle of it, showering her with houses, cars, and jewelry. The young girl, having never encountered such displays, fell for him within days. At a friend's gathering, Felix brought her along. The moment they walked in, the room fell silent. A few close girlfriends glanced at me with concern. I smiled and said, "Why is everyone so quiet? Why are you all looking at me?" Felix, with his arm around the girl, finally looked at me directly. "Hope, today's as good a time as any to say this. Let's make things clear." "Go ahead," I said. "These years of breaking up and getting back together, it's been pointless. The feelings have faded," he said. I clenched my hands tightly, the ring on my finger digging painfully into my skin, though I felt nothing. Summer is young, pure, and I truly like her. I don't want her to feel wronged, Felix said, stroking the girl's hair. I need to give her a proper status. I nodded lightly. I understand. From now on, we'll just be friends. If you ever need help, you can still come to me. As long as it's in the city, I'll take care of it. Better not, I said with a faint smile as I stood up. Since we're breaking up, let's make it clean. No need to let the girl misunderstand. Felix raised an eyebrow in slight surprise, but nodded after a moment. Fair enough. Well, you two enjoy yourselves. I'll head out first. Want me to have the driver take you? He asked. No need. I'll grab a cab. As I walked out of the room and casually closed the door behind me. Of course, Dawn can't bear to leave you. Everyone knows she's madly in love with you. I let out a self-deprecating laugh, clutched my purse tightly, and walked briskly toward the elevator. Back at the apartment, I went to the corner of the walk-in closet and took out the wedding dress I had waited 6 months to receive. Unfortunately, I'd never have the chance to wear it. The dress was custom-made and non-refundable, so I grabbed a pair of scissors and cut it up. After all, keeping it here would only serve as a painful reminder of my love for Felix. Before leaving for good, I took off the ring and placed it on the coffee table. I didn't take much with me, just my personal belongings. Everything else I left behind. After some thought, I wrote Felix a note, telling him he could do whatever he wanted with the apartment and everything in it. He didn't need to consult me. I booked a red-eye flight to Port City. My best friend had gotten married and moved there earlier this year, so it was the perfect excuse to visit her and clear my head. She invited me out for shopping and afternoon tea, followed by a small gathering in the evening with some old classmates and friends. As the night wore on and the drinks flowed, the door opened again and someone else walked in. A few of the women immediately lit up. "Lance, what a rare guest you are." "Yeah, big shot, what brings you here tonight?" "I was handling some business next door," Lance replied casually. "Heard some old friends were gathering, so I thought I'd stop by and join the fun." As he spoke, his gaze lingered in one spot for a moment before slowly shifting. My best friend nudged me discreetly. "Poppy, do you think Lance came here for you?" I looked at the man through my slightly tipsy haze. He was taller than Felix, wearing a black overcoat over a bronze-toned business suit. His features were strikingly handsome, his physique impeccable, and his legs impossibly long. I squinted at him for a while before shaking my head. "No way. We haven't been in touch for years." My best friend ignored me and called out directly, "Lance, could I trouble you to give Poppy a ride later? We've all been drinking, and I don't feel comfortable letting her take a rideshare alone." Startled, I looked up at Lance, who was already looking at me from across the room. After a brief pause, he nodded. "Sure." "Thanks, big shot," my best friend said with a grin. She leaned in close to me and whispered, "Poppy, 7 years with one man, and for what? Felix can fool around, so why can't you start fresh?" She smirked mischievously. "And Lance is such a catch. If you don't take the chance, it's a waste." "How do you know he'd even sleep with me?" I muttered. "The way he looks at you, babe, he's practically undressing you with his eyes. Trust me, I've dated 18 guys, I know what I'm talking about." Lance drove me back to my hotel. When we arrived, I unbuckled my seatbelt and thanked him. "Thanks for giving me a ride tonight." He glanced at me. "No need to thank me." I opened the car door to get out, but suddenly, Felix's words from that day echoed in my mind. On impulse, I turned back and asked, "Would you like to come up for some tea?" In the elevator, Lance kissed me. I was already tipsy, and his kiss was so forceful and domineering that I nearly ran out of breath. "There's a camera," I gasped, my face flushed, my legs weak. I could barely stand and had to cling tightly to his waist. Lance glanced at the security. I tilted my head up to look at her, my fingers playing with her tie as I pulled her closer. "You've kissed my lips swollen, and now you're saying to stop." Lance suddenly laughed. She reached out, her thumb brushing over my slightly swollen lips. "Even if you regret it later, it's too late now." Our first time, Lance didn't even wait until we were lying down. My back was pressed against the wall, and it hurt a little from the friction. Unable to hold back, I bit her, whining, "Lance, are you an animal? Don't you know how to be gentle?" Her scorching palm supported my back as she moved with intensity. Finally, she kissed the side of my neck, panting, "Dawn, I'm losing control." It wasn't until 5 minutes later that I understood what she meant. Lance carried me back to the bedroom. I buried my face in the pillow, laughing uncontrollably. "Lance, how long has it been since you've been with a woman?" Lance shot me a glance, her expression serious. "A long time. I've been busy with work these past years." I looked at her in surprise, my laughter gradually fading. After a moment, tears suddenly welled up in my eyes. "I'm sorry, Lance. I've tainted you." "Dawn, what are you saying?" Maybe it was because I was crying, but Lance seemed flustered. She clumsily wiped my tears, but they wouldn't stop. "I shouldn't have gotten involved with you." "But you already have." Lance leaned down, cupping my face in her hands. She looked at me intently, her tone unexpectedly serious. "Dawn, since you've started this, you have to see it through." On the 7th day of my trip to New York, my friend Felix from back in Washington suddenly sent me a text. "Poppy, when are you coming back to DC?" "I don't have any plans to return for now. Everyone misses you. Zoe's birthday is in a couple of days. Why don't you come back and join us?" "No, just let her know for me. I'll send a gift." "All right then. Take care of yourself." In a private room, Felix handed his phone to Frost. "Frost, look at this. Why don't you call Poppy? She'd definitely listen to you." Frost stared coldly at the words on the screen, then suddenly stubbed out his cigarette and stood up. "Let her stay wherever she wants. It'd be better if she just stayed gone." "Frost, don't be mad. Poppy's probably feeling upset. Yeah, she even took off her ring this time. She must be really hurt. But honestly, you went too far with that woman. You've already broken up. What more does she want?" Frost suddenly snapped, his voice sharp. "Listen up. No one is allowed to contact her, not even if she's dead." Fine, we won't. Calm down. Just a few days ago you were drinking so much you ended up in the hospital with a bleeding ulcer. You never had stomach problems when Poppy was around. She's only been gone a few days, and look at what you've done to yourself." The more his friends spoke, the darker Frost's expression became. In the end, he grabbed his coat and slammed the door on his way out. As he walked downstairs, the cold wind hit his face, but the fire in his chest refused to subside. Poppy really has guts, Frost thought bitterly. 7 days and not a single call or text. She's really playing this game, huh? With a cold expression, he pulled out his phone and added Poppy's number to his blocked list. "You'd better not come crying back to me, because this time I won't go soft on you like before." When Lance called, I had just finished typing the last line of my article and was formatting it. I had started writing magazine columns back in college and had gained some recognition. After graduation, I decided to go full-time, relying on this talent to make a decent living. With a flexible job that allowed me to work anywhere with my laptop, breaking up meant I didn't have to stay in New York wallowing in heartbreak. "Poppy, what do you feel like eating tonight?" Lance's voice came through clearly, instantly soothing the exhaustion from my busy afternoon as if millions of my brain cells had been revived. "All right, you decide," I replied. "How about hot pot? I know a place that serves amazing brain. It's super tender and I think you'll love it." I used to always order brain when having hot pot, but later, Flynn said it looked disgusting. So I stopped. But I vaguely remembered that Lance always preferred light, simple food. "Lance, you don't have to accommodate me like this. I'm not picky anymore." "It's not just for you. I suddenly feel like having it too. Remember back in college, there was that little cafeteria with the tender, fresh brain? It was so good." Hearing him mention it, I couldn't help but reminisce. That place really did serve amazing food. I ate there for 4 years and never got tired of it. "All right then, hot pot it is. I'll come pick you up now." Lance took me to a small, old Chongqing hot pot restaurant that had been in San Francisco for years. The place was tiny and a bit run down, but business was booming. Lance, with his polished and refined demeanor, seemed completely out of place in this setting. I watched as he carefully wiped down my chair with a napkin, skillfully sterilized the bowls and chopsticks with hot water, and poured me a glass of juice. For someone who seemed like a privileged gentleman, he handled these small, mundane tasks with surprising ease. "Lance, your ex-girlfriend must have trained you well," I couldn't help but remark. Unlike me, who had been in an on-and-off relationship for 7 years, the only time I felt truly cared for was when Frost first pursued me. Later, during the year we lived together after college, I turned into a full-on housewife. Frost had a sensitive stomach, so I learned to cook and make soups, taking care of him like a devoted partner. But now I've realized that I loved him so much, I lost myself. I forgot the basic principle of loving yourself before loving someone else. How could I expect his affection to last forever? Lance glanced up at me while dipping vegetables into the broth. Where did you hear that I had an ex-girlfriend? I froze. Back in college, wasn't there always a girl hanging around you? I thought you two were childhood sweethearts. You mean Zoe? Lance chuckled. We did grow up together, but I never dated her. I don't even like her that way. I've only ever seen her as a little sister. So, you haven't dated anyone all these years? Lance calmly rolled up the sleeves of his shirt. I've been on a few blind dates, had brief interactions, but if it didn't work out, I ended it. Oh, and after that? I lowered my gaze, recalling her initial reaction that night. For some reason, her words seemed more believable now. I suddenly understood what she meant by her earlier words. At the time, though, I felt like my whole body was falling apart. The strands of hair at my temples had been dampened countless times, and even my fingertips were trembling weakly, yet Leo showed no signs of stopping. Leo, I couldn't help but glare at her, but my eyes were misty with tears, making me look even more vulnerable. The way I called her name, however, sounded more like a soft plea than genuine anger. Leo lowered her head and kissed me gently. Lily, are you feeling good? I shook my head, refusing to answer. She wasn't upset, though. Instead, her rhythm shifted from a stormy intensity to a slow, torturous tenderness. I couldn't take it anymore. Tears welled up at the corners of my eyes, spilling over. Leo's nails grazed the small of my back, and her voice carried a hint of an unbearable sob. Lily, tell me now, does it feel good? Leo's eyes reddened with restraint, her arm muscles taut, beads of sweat dripping from her forehead one by one. That feeling of almost reaching the clouds, yet always falling just short, was driving me to tears. Yes, I whimpered, yes. Her scorching palm gripped my waist with a strength that felt almost triumphant, shattering my voice into fragments. In the end, as my consciousness slipped away, Leo whispered fiercely into my ear, Lily, if it feels good, then promise me. You'll never leave me, okay? On the night of Zoe's birthday, the gift I bought in Port City was delivered to her through a friend. Frost was sitting on the couch smoking a cigarette. The bottle of liquor in front of him was already more than half empty. The gift for Zoe was something Leo and I had picked out together. A pair of antique cufflinks from a high-end designer brand he really liked. They were quite exquisite. Zoe smiled stiffly, glancing at Frost's expression, not daring to say much. She quickly handed the gift to her girlfriend to put away. "Bring it here," Frost suddenly said. Zoe froze, but didn't dare hesitate. She quickly handed the box over. Frost stared at the pair of cufflinks. The brand's logo was subtle and understated, not immediately noticeable, but he studied them for a long time. "Put it away," he said, closing the box and pushing it aside. Zoe let out a sigh of relief and hurried to take it back. But before she could, Frost suddenly grabbed the empty bottle in front of him and smashed it hard against the coffee table. Glass shards flew everywhere. A long gash appeared on the back of his hand, blood streaming uncontrollably. The room descended into chaos. "What's going on? Why did you suddenly lose your temper, Frost? This is a serious injury. The bleeding won't stop. We need to get to the hospital right away." Frost stood there, motionless, his expression dark and full of hostility. "Dawn never bought anything from this brand," he said, his voice low and heavy with restrained elegance. Zoe quickly laughed it off. "What's the big deal? Eve probably just picked it randomly. After all, it's not like it's your birthday. For your birthday, Eve starts planning 6 months in advance." "Exactly, Frost. The place you hold in her heart is worth more than all of us combined. Everyone knows how much Dawn cares about you, how much she treasures you." Frost let out a cold laugh. "Cares about me?" The noisy crowd gradually fell silent, bit by bit. "Frost, how about I give Eve a call?" someone suggested. "Or maybe we should deal with your injury first." Zoe suddenly mustered up her courage, picked up her phone, and snapped a picture of Frost's injured hand, which was covered in blood. Without hesitation, she sent it directly to Dawn. Frost didn't stop her, maybe because Zoe acted so quickly that he didn't have time to react. The room fell silent. About 10 seconds later, Zoe's phone rang. "See, I told you, Eve cares about you so much," Zoe said excitedly. "Frost, look, it's Eve calling." She was practically beaming. The others in the room noticed that Frost's previously tense and hostile expression seemed to soften just a little. "Frost, you should answer it," Zoe said, handing the phone to him. But Frost turned his face away, refusing to even look at it. I'll answer it, Zoe said gleefully, putting the call on speaker. The moment Dawn's voice came through, Frost's jaw visibly tightened. "Zoe, what's going on? Are you hurt?" Dawn's voice was as gentle and soothing as ever. "Not me, it's Frost's hand. You wouldn't believe how bad it is. It's really scary. The blood just won't stop." Zoe rambled on for a while, but there was only silence on the other end of the line. "Eve, are you listening? Maybe you should come back." "Frost refuses to go to the hospital, and this bleeding can't go on like this," Zoe pleaded. "Zoe," Dawn's voice remained calm and melodic. Yes, Eve, I'm listening," Zoe replied eagerly, glancing at Frost and winking at him as if to say, "See? She still cares." "Don't tell me about her business anymore," Dawn said, her tone suddenly colder. Zoe's smile froze on her face. "Eve." "And happy birthday, Zoe." "Wait, Eve, don't," Zoe stammered, but the sound of the call disconnecting was already unmistakably clear. She stood there, stunned, holding the phone like it was a hot potato. She wished she could slap herself unconscious. Why had she meddled in something that wasn't her business? What had she stirred up? The room was dead silent. Frost, however, looked around at everyone with a calm expression, then smiled faintly. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongues?" he asked. No one dared to respond. Frost chuckled again, but this time his tone was sharper. "Why the hell isn't anyone saying anything?" "Frost, don't get worked up, someone said nervously. "You're bleeding even more now." "Frost, you know Eve's temper better than anyone." Lance, who had been quietly sitting in the corner peeling an apple, suddenly spoke up. "Honestly, I've wanted to say this for a long time. The things you did before, they were too hurtful. Eve's just a girl, and girls are sensitive. Even if you don't love her anymore, you should have ended things on good terms." "Who said I want to end things on good terms?" Frost's smile was cold and cutting. "She's been with me for 7 years. Even if I were raising a dog, it'd be loyal to me by now." Lance chuckled softly. "But have you ever thought about it? A girl only has so many 7 years to give. What if Eve never comes back? Impossible." No one noticed the faint tremor in Frost's voice as he said this. "There's no such thing as impossible in this world," Lance replied quietly. "When a heart is completely broken and frozen, warming it back up is no easy task. Frost, don't do something you'll regret for the rest of your life." With that, Lance stood up, grabbed his bag, and left the room. Sitting not far away, Leo watched him leave, his gaze dark and unreadable. After all, the man who had just spoken was his wife of 2 years. Was he feeling sorry for Hope, standing up for her, or was he simply overcome with emotion, accusing Ron of not treating his wife well? "Ron, aren't you going to see your sister-in-law off?" Ron curled his lips into a faint smile, lit a cigarette, and replied, "Who's your sister-in-law? My wife is on set right now, filming. She won't be done until next month. Just sit down." His friend shook his head helplessly, but Ron remained indifferent. Shaven was different from Hope. Hope didn't have the burden of her family holding her back, and she could earn her own money. If they ever split up, the worst that would happen is her standard of living might drop a bit. But Shaven? Behind her was the bottomless pit of the Shaven family, not to mention her bedridden older brother. She couldn't leave Ron, and even if she had the guts, she wouldn't dare. I had just hung up the phone when Lance came up behind me, wrapping his arms around me. He rested his chin against the side of my neck but didn't say a word. I smiled faintly. "What's wrong?" "Poppy, will you go back?" "Go back where?" "Back to New York. I don't have any plans to go back for now, but who knows in the future? After all, I haven't done anything shameful. Why shouldn't I go back? My family is still there." Lance stayed silent again, and that's when I realized the subtext of his question. "Are you asking if I'll get back together with Frost?" "Will you?" "Absolutely not. Do you believe me?" Lance lowered his gaze, his high-bridged nose brushing lightly against my cheek. "I want to believe you. Lance, I have my pride too, you know." "Do you still have feelings for him?" I thought about it seriously. If I said I didn't feel anything at all, that wouldn't be realistic. After all, it's been so many years. Lance suddenly gave me a light bite. "Stop talking, Poppy. Let me finish. But if you're asking whether it's reluctance or resentment, it's neither. When we broke up, I wasn't devastated or heartbroken. So maybe I stopped loving him a long time ago. Maybe I was already preparing for the breakup when he started losing interest in the relationship. "I won't," Lance said firmly. "I won't lose interest, I won't be unfaithful, and I won't make you cry or hurt you." Lance held me tighter and tighter, and finally he steadied himself and said, "Poppy, be with me." But I didn't respond to his kiss. In fact, I gently pushed him away in the end. "Lance, I'm sorry." "Why are you apologizing?" He lowered his head to look at me, his eyes slightly red. "It's my problem." I avoided his gaze. "I don't want to talk about relationships anymore." "Then what about these past few days? What were we?" Lance gripped my shoulders, his voice trembling as he took a deep breath. "What do you take me for?" I clenched my fists tightly, took a deep breath, and said, "Let's just say we were fulfilling each other's needs. If you're okay with it, we can keep things as they are. If you meet someone you like, you can end it any time." "What kind of relationship is that?" "A way to meet physical needs. You can think of it that way." I refused to look up at him, afraid I wouldn't be able to hold back my tears. "Lance, I'm really sorry. If this arrangement makes you uncomfortable, I'll leave New York immediately. I swear I'll never bother you again." Lance's eyes were bloodshot. He let go of me and took a step back. He seemed to smile, but it was a broken smile. "Poppy, you can't do this to me." "Lance?" He turned around, grabbed his coat, and walked out the door. I instinctively took a step forward but stopped myself. Lance walked all the way to the door, and just as his hand gripped the handle, he suddenly turned back to look at me. He even gave me a reassuring smile, as if to comfort me. "Sorry, I just need some time alone to clear my head." I nodded. "All right, I won't bother you. Take your time and let me know when you're ready." Lance left, and I collapsed onto the couch as if all the strength had drained from my body. There was an indescribable ache in my chest, but at the same time I was painfully aware that I wasn't in a place to fully invest myself in loving someone again. To start a new relationship with my whole heart and no distractions. I was scared, terrified really. Afraid that it would all end the same way, with both of us growing to resent each other. Afraid of seeing that look in someone's eyes, the one that starts with passion, fades to indifference, and eventually turns cold and distant. I didn't want to repeat the same mistakes. I shouldn't have let myself get involved with Lance. If I had known from the beginning that he liked me, I never would have let him take me back to the hotel that night. It was 3 a.m. when Lance drove back to the hotel where I was staying. He got out of the car but didn't go inside. Instead, he leaned against the car and lit a cigarette. Countless windows were lit up, but he couldn't tell which one was mine. Still, he knew I was there, knew I was in the same city as him, here in New York. He knew that if he walked inside, he could see me in 10 minutes. That thought alone brought him a strange sense of comfort and satisfaction. It had only taken him 2 days to sort through his feelings. He had managed to calm himself down with surprising ease. I had just ended a relationship, and I didn't want to start another one. That was perfectly normal. My disappointment and resistance toward men, relationships, and even marriage were understandable. Maybe he had been too impatient, too pushy. If staying in this undefined relationship made me feel more at ease, more comfortable, he didn't mind not having a label. After all, what could be more painful than unrequited love? If there was something worse, it had to be what happened a 1.5 years ago, when he found out I had moved in with Frost. That was when he had truly decided to let go. He even tried going on blind dates, meeting new people, and attempting to move on. But after trying, he realized it wasn't possible, so he ended it decisively. No matter how much his family pushed him after that, he never entertained the idea again. If I hadn't broken up and come to New York, if he hadn't asked me to come upstairs that night, maybe he would have spent the rest of his life alone. Lance stubbed out his cigarette, his gaze gradually steadying with determination. But I had come to New York. I had said yes that night. If the girl he loved was now right by his side, and he still managed to lose her, then Lance figured he didn't deserve happiness at all. The night before I was set to leave New York, I went out for drinks with my best friend. "So, how are things going with Lance?" she asked, giving me a once-over. "Tisk, tisk, look at you. Your face is glowing, and your skin is so radiant I could pinch water out of it. Lance must be treating you well." I shook my head. I don't want to waste his time. I don't want to date, and I don't want to get married. "Lily," she said, her tone serious, "why are you punishing yourself for someone else's mistakes? Not to mention, it's unfair to Leo. They say the previous generation plants the trees so the next can enjoy the shade, and I agree with that. But there's no reason for someone to suffer the consequences of their predecessors' mistakes. Frost was a terrible person, but Leo is a man worth trusting your life with. Why are you holding a grudge against Leo because of Frost?" "I'm not holding a grudge against him. I just haven't gotten over it yet." "No, it's not that you haven't gotten over it. You've been stuck in the shadow of that dog Frost for 7 years. You've convinced yourself that you don't deserve true love and happiness. Am I right? The pain and turmoil of breaking up and getting back together, the constant fear of losing everything, it's left me on edge, doubting everyone and everything. Deep down, I've convinced myself that I'll never have someone who loves me wholeheartedly. But why can't I have true love? Those who betray genuine love deserve to swallow 1,000 needles. But those who love sincerely, heaven will always open a new window for them. Sweetheart, do you even realize how amazing you are?" My best friend hugged me gently, swaying me back and forth. "You're so beautiful, with such a great figure. You were already earning your own money in college, and you even helped support me. You're gorgeous, capable, and kind. If I were a man, I'd marry you in a heartbeat. You deserve to be loved, Poppy. You deserve a man who cherishes you, not someone like Frost who just wastes your time and drains you. Trust me, sweetheart, he's going to regret it. He'll spend the rest of his life haunted by losing you. Now call Liam and cancel your plane ticket. Don't think I don't know you're planning to run away again." I looked at my best friend, my eyes gradually welling up with warmth. "But Summer, what if Liam and I end up like this too?" "You won't. Why not?" "Because I believe a man with enough self-control and standards, who refuses to settle for less, would never be foolish enough to lose the girl he truly loves once he's found her. Do you think Liam is anything like Frost, that pig?" I shook my head. "Of course not." Then call him now, sweetheart. You have no idea how happy he'll be. I thought about how happy Liam would be, but I never could have imagined just how much. A man in his late 20s, the CEO of a thriving family business, someone so accomplished. When he picked up my call, he was as happy as a child. My best friend grinned at me. "Poppy, are you happy?" I nodded. "I think I am." "See, you're happy, and Liam's even happier. Isn't that all that matters?" At this point, my best friend suddenly couldn't help but laugh. I swear, every time I think about how miserable Frost is going to be in the future, I get so happy I could burst. Or maybe he's already found someone new, I said with a faint smile. "Summer, let's not talk about him anymore." In that moment, I was able to say those words with a calm heart, as if that person no longer had anything to do with me. It felt like he was truly, finally, out of my life. When Liam's car pulled up downstairs, I had just stepped out of the bar. She stood under the street lamp, arms open wide toward me. I stopped in my tracks and looked at her. I had to admit, she was stunning, every feature perfectly aligned with my taste. Men can like countless women at the same time. As long as there's no cheating or messy overlaps, even a seamless transition between relationships isn't a big deal. So, if I start dating again after a breakup, there's nothing wrong with that. I walked toward her, and she strode toward me in large steps. Amid the bustling crowd, Liam and I kissed as if no one else existed. Her heart was racing, and when I touched the back of her neck, it was burning hot. "Liam, you've got a fever," I said. Her forehead rested against mine as she panted softly, her voice low and husky. "I don't know what's wrong with me. This always happens when I'm around you." I chuckled lightly, standing on tiptoe to kiss her chin. "Maybe it'll get better if we spend more time together." Her ears turned even redder, hotter. She cupped my face, her gaze intense and fiery. "What am I to you right now?" I teased her on purpose. "What do you think, a fling or a boyfriend?" She didn't wait for my answer, burying her face in the crook of my neck. In a small voice, she said, "Forget it, don't answer. I don't want to know right now." I wrapped my arms lightly around her waist, pulling her closer. "Are you sure you don't want to know?" "Boyfriend," she whispered. Meanwhile, Frost's car stopped at the mouth of an alley. He got out and walked deeper into the narrow street where an old tailor lived. The man's ancestors had once been renowned textile artisans, but now, in his old age, he had long since retired and closed his doors to the public. Frost, however, had his ways of persuading the elderly craftsman. A tattered wedding dress that Dawn had left behind was delivered to the tailor 2 weeks ago. By today, it was nearly restored to its original glory. As Frost walked, he thought about something Zoe had said a few days ago. Every girl dreams of wearing a wedding dress and marrying the one she loves. He and Dawn had been together for 7 years, yet he had never considered proposing. He hadn't even realized that Dawn might have once dreamed of proposing to him. He knew he'd been a jerk lately. But those other women? They were nothing more than fleeting distractions. Even Summer, the one who had caused Dawn to leave him, had only held his interest for 3 days. After that, he found her dull, and his thoughts inevitably returned to Dawn. 7 years together had made him complacent, even bored at times. But some people are like air, colorless, tasteless, and unnoticed until they're gone. Only then do you realize how essential they are. In the days since Dawn left, nothing seemed to matter to him. Even when he was out with friends, his mind was filled with thoughts of her. Especially when he drank too much. If Dawn were there, she'd pretend to be angry and stop him. If she couldn't stop him, she'd make him soup late at night, let him rest his head on her lap, and massage his temples with her soft fingers, all while murmuring little complaints and tender scoldings. Back then, it annoyed him. Now he missed it desperately. Flynn sighed. This time, when Dawn came back, he was going to propose. He had always known how much she wanted to marry him. Giving her that would bring her peace, and maybe she'd forgive him. The tailor's craftsmanship was truly remarkable. The wedding dress was restored to look almost identical to its original state. Flynn paid the bill and left, but as he was walking away, his phone suddenly rang. For some reason, he felt a pang of nervousness. It wasn't until he saw Zoe's name flashing on the screen that his wildly beating heart began to calm. "Flynn," Zoe said, "there's something I've been thinking about. I still have to tell you." "What's the matter? Promise me you won't get upset when you hear this. It might not even be true, just some baseless rumor." "What's going on?" It's about Poppy. Actually, never mind. I think it's probably just gossip." "Zoe, since when did you get so hesitant? Just spit it out. What happened with her? Did she go back to New York? Is it about Frost?" Zoe suddenly felt a pang of discomfort. How did things end up like this? Of all people, why did the rumors about Poppy have to involve Leo? If there was anyone Felix couldn't stand over the years, it was Leo. Especially 2 years ago, when their companies clashed over a major project. Leo's firm, Horizon Industries, narrowly won, leaving Felix to return empty-handed. It was the first time Felix had ever tasted defeat. Since then, their already tense relationship had turned downright hostile. "I'm telling you, don't get mad. It's just hearsay for now, no solid evidence. But someone said they saw Poppy in London." Felix's fingers tightened around his phone, but his voice remained calm and controlled. "What about her in London?" "She seemed to be with Leo. Of course, it could have just been a meal, nothing more." "I see. Thanks, Zoe. If there's nothing else, I'll hang up now." Felix ended the call. He was holding a large paper bag, the one containing the wedding dress Poppy had picked out. Step by step, he walked through the biting early winter wind in Washington, all the way to the car parked at the end of the street. Suddenly, he stopped. A faint, almost imperceptible smile appeared on his handsome face. The next moment, without hesitation, he tossed the elegant paper bag into a nearby trash can. 2 months after Poppy left, Felix had sent her a text. It went through, but there was no reply. The message read, "I'm planning to sell the apartment. What should I do with your clothes?" Maybe he had forgotten that Poppy had left him a note, telling him to handle everything however he wanted. Or maybe he had sent the message on purpose, just to find an excuse to reach out to her. Perhaps, deep down, Felix thought he was offering her an olive branch. If she were smart, she would take the opportunity to come back. His temper might seem bad, but he was actually easy to appease. Poppy never replied. The apartment, of course, was never sold. Her clothes and belongings remained exactly as they were, as if she had never left. Felix often found himself returning to the apartment late at night after business dinners, lying on her bed and staring sleeplessly at the ceiling until dawn. By the 3rd month after Poppy's departure, nothing had changed. It was another late night, just before midnight, when Felix finally dialed her number. Poppy had always been a reserved, well-behaved girl. Though her family was modest, she had never wanted for anything, and her parents adored her. But because of her striking beauty, her elders had been strict with her from a young age. It wasn't until the autumn after her college graduation that she moved in with Felix. She still remembered that night vividly. She had been so nervous that her whole body trembled, her skin flushed with a deep, radiant warmth. She was breathtakingly beautiful, so delicate in his arms that she seemed on the verge of breaking, evoking both desire and tenderness. When everything ended, she cried uncontrollably, repeating over and over, "Flynn, you're not allowed to bully me. You can't bully me in the future. You have to be good to me, you have to marry me. Flynn, we'll always be together, right?" But the innocent and naive Hope, who believed she would always be with the man she loved, had been lost for a long time. So long that she could barely remember what expression she wore the last time they broke up. Was she smiling and nodding, or were her eyes red and filled with tears? The phone rang for quite a while. Just when she thought it wouldn't be answered, the call connected. In that moment, she actually wanted to say, "Poppy, come back." But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, "Hope, stop messing around and come back." Her foolish, ridiculous words were interrupted by a man's low chuckle. That laugh, sharp and cold like a blade, left Flynn feeling as though his entire body was wrapped in icy steel, unable to move. The vice president said, "Red roses don't last overnight. Otherwise, someone else might snatch them away." "Lance?" Flynn growled through gritted teeth, his eyes bloodshot as he repeated the name. "Lance." Lance lowered his head and gently kissed his girl. Hope's eyelashes still held a single tear. Her lips were slightly pursed, her eyes closed, but her face was filled with grievance. Her heart softened uncontrollably. He kissed her lashes, wiping away that tear. "She's still unconscious, probably mad at me. I need to wake her up first," Lance murmured. Flynn's voice abruptly stopped. Lance ended the call and casually turned off his phone. His kiss landed on Hope's slightly swollen lips. "Baby, wake up. You know, I've thought about what it would be like to see Flynn again." She came from a privileged background, proud to her core. "We broke up on peaceful terms. If we ever ran into each other, she'd either ignore me or we'd politely nod and exchange greetings. After all, my family and friends are all in New York, and Flynn and I share some mutual acquaintances. It's impossible to avoid crossing paths forever. But I never imagined that someone as untouchable and revered as Flynn could look so disheveled and out of sorts. At the time, I was in an exceptionally good mood after a long, restful sleep. I was wearing a new blush pink dress and had done my makeup beautifully. I looked like a ripe, sweet peach. I was holding Lance's arm, laughing as we walked out of the revolving door, and then I saw Flynn stepping out of a car. I froze, my steps halted. Lance's warm fingers gently clasped mine. Flynn's shirt was slightly wrinkled, and he wasn't wearing a tie. Her face showed unmistakable fatigue, her brows furrowed deeply, and her eyes bloodshot. People bustled around us, and a music fountain nearby played cheerful tunes. The scene felt like a slow-motion shot from a movie. Only I wasn't a spectator. I was one of the unsuspecting protagonists. Perhaps it was Flynn's unexpected appearance that caught me off guard. Lance instinctively shielded me behind him, but Flynn's expression remained calm. She called my name softly, just like she used to during our passionate days together. "Poppy." I stood there without moving, the cheerful music still echoing in my ears. Yet for some reason, I felt an indescribable sadness in my heart. Perhaps it was for Hope, who had to endure cruel words that night. Perhaps it was for Hope, who was abruptly told about the breakup that same evening. Or perhaps it was for Hope, who foolishly loved for 7 years, but took only 7 days to completely let go. "Poppy, I've come to take you back to New York." Flynn never once looked at Lance. Her gaze fell on my face, and to my surprise, it was incredibly gentle. I couldn't even remember how long it had been since she last looked at me like that before we broke up. Flynn stopped about 3 feet in front of me. "Poppy, let's get married when we go back. From now on, we'll live a good life together, okay?" She said it so earnestly, so sincerely that for a moment I almost believed it. I almost believed that the Flynn who had recently said she wanted to give another woman a proper title was just a figment of my imagination. But it's too late, Flynn. A shattered heart can't be pieced back together, and the new heart that grew in the swamp has already been given to someone else. I shook my head lightly. "Flynn, just go." "Poppy, I never touched Summer. We broke up in less than 3 days. The wedding dress you bought, I've already had it restored by a master tailor. And our wedding bands, I've kept them safe. Poppy, I even had a diamond ring custom made. I'm serious." Flynn's eyes grew redder, and her voice began to tremble faintly. She held out the delicate diamond ring box in front of me, as if presenting a treasure. Her eyes were filled with hope and caution, so careful and fragile. Looking at her like this, I couldn't deny that it still hurt. But that was all it was, just pain. "Flynn, I already have a boyfriend." I tightly gripped Liam's hand and walked from behind her to stand beside him, shoulder to shoulder. The color drained from Flynn's face in an instant. Her gaze slowly dropped, finally landing on Liam's and my intertwined fingers. On our ring fingers were matching bands, just like the ones Flynn and I used to wear. "Eve, are you serious?" I took a deep breath, turned to look at Liam, and nodded firmly. "Yes, I'm serious." Flynn suddenly let out a low, bitter laugh. "Do you really think she's serious about you? Do you think she's truly sincere? 2 years ago, she fought me tooth and nail over a project, and now she's pursuing you. Dawn, do you really think there's no ulterior? You see, I don't even feel sad anymore. Just regret. Why is it that living always seems to come with things we regret? Until today, I never regretted loving Flynn. For better or worse, it was part of my life. But at this moment, I can't help but feel deep regret. Why did it take me 7 years to realize that deep down, Flynn never truly valued me? Lance looked at me with eyes full of concern and pulled me into his arms. My face was pale, but I still smiled and shook my head at him. "I'm fine. Lance, be good. Go wait in the car. Leave this to me. I want to be with you." I held onto his hand tightly, refusing to let go. Lance stared at me for a moment, then suddenly leaned down and kissed me firmly. "Poppy, I, Lance, have always lived my life with a clear conscience. I've never regretted anything. But right now, I truly regret not taking you away from her back then. What right do you have to take her from me? Taking advantage of someone's vulnerability, what kind of man does that make you, Lance?" "Flynn, you don't deserve the 7 years of love and affection Hope gave you." Maybe that sentence completely enraged Flynn. She had never lost her composure like this before, and her words became reckless. "And what about you, Lance? You're with a woman who's been with me for 7 years. What gives you the right to stand here and lecture me? What do you even like about her? Do you truly like Hope, or do you just like the fact that she's my woman?" I scolded him softly, but still, my heart ached as I carefully adjusted my movements. "We need to go to the hospital for stitches, then you have to come with me. I get queasy around needles." I couldn't help but glare at him, but in the end, I nodded. Lance immediately pulled me into his arms. "And I want you to kiss me. It hurts so much right here." I slowly stood on my tiptoes and placed a gentle kiss on his wound. Flynn said nothing more. The sunset stretched his shadow quietly along the ground. Perhaps it was in that moment when Hope was wiping the blood off Lance's face, or maybe it was when Hope kissed Lance to comfort him, that Flynn finally realized with painful clarity, Hope truly no longer loved him. That question from Sue-Wan that day had unexpectedly come true. Hope would never return to his side. Flynn had thought he was the one who could easily let go of their 7 years together. He had thought he was the one in control of this relationship. He had thought he would always have the upper hand. But in that moment, he understood. The one who couldn't let go was him. Hope was the string tethering the kite. When the string snapped, the kite lost its direction and could never find its way home again. I watched Flynn turn and walk toward his car, his lonely figure fading into the distance. The setting sun was suddenly swallowed by the horizon, and the sky turned a pale, rosy blue. Flynn's car gradually disappeared down the road. It felt as if I could see the 7 years of Hope's life, from 17 to 24, speeding away with that car, never to be seen again. I knew from that day forward, the name Flynn would be just like any other ordinary name in the world. I wouldn't deliberately forget it, but I would never actively think of it again. "Lily?" Liam gently pulled me into his arms. I turned to look up at him, smiling softly. "Let's go. We should head to the hospital." The night Liam proposed, he drank a lot and said so many things to me, but the only words that truly stayed with me were the simplest ones. "Lily, we will never have a 7-year story like that. Lily, we will never break up." In the moment someone makes a vow, they must truly believe it. Later, when they break that vow, they wonder how anyone could have believed it in the first place. But I was willing to believe Liam. In truth, it was about believing in myself, believing that I was worthy of love, believing that true love would, at least once, not be betrayed. On the day Liam and I got engaged, I received a package from the Capitol. Inside was the wedding dress I had once bought, now restored by a craftsman Felix had found. There was also a card in the box, written in Felix's handwriting. It read, "Lily, I will always wait for you." Liam, standing beside me, saw the card as well. She smiled with confidence and planted a firm kiss on my cheek. Too bad for her. I'm not giving her the chance. That night, however, the wedding dress mysteriously disappeared. But by then, I no longer cared about such trivial matters. 3 years after Liam and I got married, we welcomed our daughter, Lily. Not long after her birth, Frost sent us an abundance of expensive gifts. I asked Liam what we should do. She remained as confident as ever, though not particularly gracious. "Our daughter doesn't need any of that. Donate it all to a charity," she added with a smirk. "Zoe, talk some sense into her. She's not getting any younger, still unmarried, no wife, no kids, and yet she's obsessing over someone else's wife and child. What a mess." I couldn't help but press my lips together in a smile. Why bother worrying about someone else's life? Liam suddenly became inexplicably happy. In front of a room full of housekeepers and nannies, he picked me up and spun me around. "Lily, what you just said was so nice. Can you say it again?" "What?" I asked. "Put me down first, I'm getting dizzy." But Liam wouldn't let go. Instead, he sat down with me still in his arms, kissing me over and over. "That thing you said earlier about not worrying about other people's business." I couldn't help but laugh, though there was a strange ache in my chest. A close friend had once confided in me that the 2 years after I graduated college were the hardest for Liam. But he never mentioned it to me, never showed even a hint of negativity in front of me. Why bother with other people's business? What matters most is living our own lives well. As soon as I said this, I reached up and wrapped my arms around his neck. I kissed his slightly flushed ear and whispered softly, "Honey, our daughter is 2 months old now. Let's go to bed early tonight." Outside of Frost's family, when Dawn's daughter turned 3, their family of 3 returned to New York for a visit and stayed for a few months. Dawn and I had many mutual friends, and they were constantly hosting gatherings. Naturally, I didn't attend, but after every event, I couldn't help but ask about her. They told me that after getting married, Dawn had gone to Paris for 2 years to study. During that time, Leo tirelessly traveled back and forth between New York and Paris without a single complaint. Later, Dawn returned to New York and started her own magazine, serving as its editor-in-chief. Leo supported all her decisions and choices unconditionally, though he wasn't too thrilled about her frequent late nights at work. She could have lived a life of leisure and luxury, but she didn't. She became more and more beautiful, but her beauty was never just skin deep. Her relationship with Leo grew stronger, and their daughter was stunningly beautiful, a spitting image of Dawn as a child. What she didn't know was that I still had a photo of her from when she was 5 years old, tucked away at home. New York is a big city, but the social circles are small. Yet, I never once ran into Dawn. Until one day at lunch, I happened to see their daughter, Rain, at a buffet restaurant. She was hiding behind a decorative rock, secretly eating a cup of ice cream, looking like an adorable little squirrel with her cheeks puffed out. My feet stopped on their own, and I just stood there watching her, unable to look away. After a moment, I heard Dawn calling her name. Rain heard it too, her eyes widening in panic as she clutched the ice cream cup, unsure of what to do. Almost instinctively, I walked over, crouched down, and asked softly, "Are you scared your mom will find out you're sneaking ice cream?" She nodded, her big eyes darting around, full of cleverness. "Want me to help you hide?" I offered. She hesitated, studying me for a while, as if making sure I wasn't a bad person. Then she nodded again. I picked her up. She was so small, soft, and sweet-smelling, and she nestled into my arms. Her tiny hand played with the button on my suit jacket, and suddenly, in her little voice, she asked, "Uncle, do you know me?" My throat felt like it was blocked, a bitter taste rising. Everything in front of me blurred as my vision grew misty. If time could go back to that year, that night, I wouldn't let any of it happen. Dawn would be my wife. We would have gotten married in New York, had children, and she wouldn't be called Rain. She would be our daughter, mine and Dawn's. I tilted my head back, forcing the tears to stay in, then looked down and smiled at her. "That's right, I know you. Do you know my name?" Her small, soft hands wrapped around me as she whispered, "I'll tell you a secret. My name is Rain. It's because Daddy, Leo, and Mommy, Dawn, kissed, and then I came along." "Is that so? That's a really lovely name." I kissed her soft, tender cheek. "All right, we can't stay hidden for too long or Mommy will worry." She nodded obediently. "Then I'll just take one more bite of ice cream. Just one bite, okay?" She took a huge bite, grinning up at me like a little kitten. I patted her hair. "Go find Mommy now." I watched her walk away, her princess dress blooming like a flower, opening fully in Dawn's embrace. I didn't look at Dawn again. I was afraid that in the bustling hall, I might foolishly let my tears fall. Dawn wouldn't care about anything related to me, but Leo would surely find my behavior laughable. Yes, the first half of my life was so absurd, so ridiculous, and yet the rest of my life doesn't even allow for such absurdity or ridicule. It's all just a hopeless dream.